Welcome to Farang Angmor Podcast. Level up your learning, one tip at a time. You have no idea how excited I am. Starting a podcast is something I've been wanting to do for so many years, but I've never really had the courage to start one. What if it fails? What if nobody wants to listen to it? All these thoughts. But here I am, starting our first episode of this podcast and speaking 90% or maybe 95, 100% in English. And I'm pretty sure I'll make a lot of mistakes along the way, so please bear with me. Still, I hope you will gain something useful from this podcast. Today, we're diving into one of the biggest challenges English learners face. Thinking in English without translating everything in your head first. เป็นไหมคะ เป็นเหมือนกันค่ะ Does this sound familiar to you? You want to speak English fluently, super smoothly, but you get stuck translating in your head. Like, คำนี้แปลว่าอะไรนะ How do I say this? จะพูดยังไงแล้วล่ะ By the time you say I think I thought the person you're talking to has already walked away. ไปแล้วจ้าเขาไปไกลแล้วจ้า I'm translating in my head right now. I know it can be frustrating, but no worries. Today we are going to tackle this together. Just by tweaking how we learn, you'll see a lot of improvements in how quickly and naturally you can speak because, let's face it, how we learn is just as important, if not more, than what we learn. So, let's get into it. Before we jump into the tips, let's talk about why we get stuck translating in the first place.I went through the same experience when I was learning English in school. The way most of us learn is through translation. We open up our textbooks, right? And they are filled with Thai translations next to every English word. จดทุกคำเลยค่ะ คำนี้แปลว่าอย่างนี้ คำนี้แปลว่าอย่างนี้ That's what I did. And I'm pretty sure a lot of you did that too. There's nothing wrong with that, but we learn primarily.through memorization. English word equals to this Thai word equals to this English word. At the very beginning, this helps, like when we first learn I เท่ากับฉัน you เท่ากับคุณ house เท่ากับบ้าน But there's something problematic about that because it has limitations in terms of learning to speak fluently.The big reasons why relying on translation all the time might hold us back is number one, some words or phrases in English don't exist in Thai and vice versa. English and Thai come from different cultures and ways of thinking. So some expressions just don't translate perfectly. For example, some Thai words like เกรงใจ ฝากเนื้อฝากตัวด้วยนะคะกตัญญู all these kinds of words they don't exist in English word like directly or some English word like awkward bully American dream all these like that are deeply rooted in English or American culture we can try to explain them but there's no exact translation for that. Number two, a single word can have multiple meanings.Take the word cool, for example. Cool can mean cold, เย็น now, right? But it can also mean awesome, เจ๋ง cool, เจ๋ง Or the word right. It can mean ด้านขวา the right side. It can mean correct, ถูกต้อง Or it can be like human rights, สิทธิ์นะคะ So it can mean many things, right? It can have multiple translations. Number three.It creates a habit of always needing to translate before speaking. And this is the big one. The more we translate in our head, the more we get stuck in this habit. And this slows us down when we need to communicate quickly. So, should we stop translating altogether? Am I saying that you should never translate again? No, not at all. I'm not saying that at all. In the beginning, some translation is totally fine. It's actually pretty helpful. But once you have got the basics down, like vocabulary and simple sentences, it's time to shift your focus to something else. And that is context. So how do you actually train yourself to think in English? I'm going to share 2 powerful techniques that have helped me, a lot of my students, and I'm sure they will help you too. Tip number 1, learn from the context. Context is everything. When we talk about context, we mean the situation, the surrounding, the environment in which words are used. Instead of memorizing the direct translation of a word, learn how it's used in real life situations. Let's take an example, the word spectacular. I first heard this word from the movie Crazy Rich Asians, and there's this movie scene where there's a character that say, wow, that's spectacular. So instead of memorizing that spectacular equals to น่าตื่นตาตื่นใจสวยงดงามอลังการ instead of memorizing the direct translation, you watch that from a movie scene or maybe a conversation that native speakers had where someone says, wow, that view is spectacular. When you hear it in context, it's easier to remember that you use spectacular when describing something really beautiful, like a landscape or an amazing building. The context makes the meaning stick. You remember it better, right? So for this one, I remember without even knowing what translation it is or how it's being translated into Thai. I remember if I see something beautiful and I want to say, wow, it's beautiful, I say, that's spectacular. Or let's see another example. Let's say you hear someone say, it's a tough call. It's a tough call. That's going to be pretty difficult to translate as well because it's an idiom. But I saw this and I heard this line from the movie, one of my favorite movie, Devil Wears Prada. So in a movie, that movie scene, they're deciding between 2 things that's pretty difficult to decide. So now I know that it's a tough call means making a difficult decision, choosing between 2 things, right? So learning from context helps you understand 3 main things. Number 1, when and how to use the phrase. Number 2, you will remember it better because there's a story or situation attached to it. Number 3, you can apply it more naturally in your conversation. The second tip is to start learning from definitions, not just translations. This means using monolingual dictionaries, English to English dictionaries, แปลอังกฤษเป็นอังกฤษ instead of bilingual ones. แปลไทยเป็นอังกฤษอังกฤษเป็นไทย that's bilingual dictionary. For example, if you don't know what spectacular means, type spectacular meaning into Google. You get the definition, impressive, grand, or beautiful. Now you're learning the word from its meaning in English, not by translating it into Thai. There are great dictionaries like Cambridge, Oxford, or Merriam-Webster, so many other ones that not only give you the meaning but also show you examples, sentences, synonyms, and even pronunciation. This helps you understand how to use the word in various situations. And if you are ever unsure, you can always double check the translation later, but start with the definition first. So you understand the meaning first before jumping right into translation. So let's recap. To stop translating in your head and start thinking directly in English. Number 1, learn from the context. Watch movies, listen to songs, and observe how words are used in real life situations. Number 2, learn from the definition. Use English to English dictionaries to understand words through their meanings and examples. Try incorporating these two strategies into your daily practice, and I guarantee you will see a big difference. You think faster, speak more naturally, and feel a lot more confident when using English. You can listen to this podcast anywhere, anytime on your favorite platform: YouTube, Spotify, SoundCloud, or Apple Music. Once you have listened to this episode, I would love to hear what you think. Let me know how we can improve, what topics you want to hear next, or any other thoughts you have got to help us make this podcast even better. And that's it for today. Bye. And this is Farang Angmor Podcast. Until next time, happy learning.